Hello and welcome to another Manfred Mentors episode number 10 today. We're going to talk about how people are doing it all wrong when it comes to release notes. Because let's face it, most of the time you don't even look at the release notes, and that's the first mistake that you can make. A lot of the times release notes actually create a lot of work to put together, for example, also in a Trino project, but they provide a lot of useful information. And today we're going to talk about how to read those release notes in Trino for the example on the latest release, Trino 479. So let's dive right in. As usual, before we go do that, just a quick reminder, you can support my work by looking at my GitHub profile at github.com/simpleagility. And that's already it. I would love to hear from you also what new episodes you want to have in this one. But now let's look at release notes. So where do you even find the Trino release notes? So if you go to the Trino website and you upgrade Trino, you might just go to download Trino and you see here there's the different artifacts available. And there is a little link here that shows release notes. Not that obvious, but it's visible enough. Also specifically, it's very visible if you go to docs. Right here at the bottom, there's release notes, and you see the release notes for all the different versions. You saw 2024, we had a lot of release notes. Unfortunately, this year, 2025, we are nearing the end of it. Today is the 19th of December, and I think we're probably not going to cut another one this year. We just cut the 479 release, which we're going to talk about more today, and we'll see how that goes. What that means that we have less releases means that each individual release is bigger and has more changes, which potentially makes adoption for it a little bit harder, but it also means that you get your fixes and stuff a little bit later, because if you fix something and then you have to wait for 2 weeks or 2 months to get a release out that contains the fix, well, there's a difference, right? But anyway, so we had Trino 479. We can look at the release notes here, and it's a big wall of text, but it's also actually very useful wall of text because it has a few general aspects. The first thing you have to keep in mind is that depending on how you use Trino, you don't need to look at everything. So for example, we have the section about the general use cases and general core parts of Trino. They will affect you most likely. The web UI will affect you if you use the web UI. The JDBC driver will affect you if you use the JDBC driver. The Docker image will only affect you if you deploy via Helm or the Docker container. It won't affect you if you're using the tarball, right? So no point looking at that. CLI, same. The most important part that will or will not affect you is the connectors. Most people that use Trino, they don't really use all the connectors. They use like 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5, but never all of them. So if you are not a user of, say, the Loki connector, well, you don't really care about this failure when initializing the connector. So no need to look at that. And of course, when you look over multiple release notes, which you should always do, you should always look at all the release notes that affect you. So for example, if you're updating from Trino 471 to 474 to Trino 479, well, you should also review 78, 77, 70, like all the ones in between. So it makes a difference how much you have to review. So those are the ones you have to review. And then last, the one is the SPI, so the service provider interface. That is only important for you if you're using plugins that are not part of the Trino release, because every Trino release ships all the plugins and stuff that's in it, but you can also write your custom plugins. Custom plugins have to be written for the same release because these SPI changes potentially affect you. Now, since this is a big release, I have composed a little bit of a summary of the things that I think that are worth checking. I will also talk about this more a little bit again in the Trino community broadcast in January. You should check that one out. I talked about this in Manfred Mentors 9 just yesterday. But let's look at what I thought is useful here to know about for Trino 479. First one is, this is the first release where Java 25 is actually used to build Trino and to run Trino. Like it's required for that. That's a good thing because Java 25 is the latest Java release that came out in September. And we're finally using it, which is great because it has more performance improvements. Again, we can use more modern language features, more modern libraries, and so on. So this is important for you to know. It's specifically important if you're deploying Trino on the tarball. If you're deploying Trino via the Docker container, it doesn't matter. The Docker container already has the necessary and correct Java in it, so it won't really bother you or whatever, unless you have to do some external instrumentation or whatever else and look into it in more detail. But typically, who cares? The Docker container runs and works, and that's good enough for you, typically. We already updated the Docker container itself in 4.78, by the way, if you looked at that, which came out shortly after Java 25 was released. Another change worth mentioning is publishing the processing time for a query now when it's in the finishing state to the event listeners. So the event listener plugins, which you can find out more about in the docs here. If you look at administration, there's a bunch of event listeners. So we have all these. They can listen to events that are fired when a query goes through the different stages, from like it's being received, it's processing, and at some stage, hopefully it finished or it failed. But these states are published to the event listeners. And the finishing state now has the total processing time, which is cool. The explain plan no longer supports the type logical and distributed. They got folded in and happen automatically. So if you have statements where you run an explain plan for a query, the logical and distributed keywords are no longer supported. That's kind of a breaking change if you use those queries yourself and have them written in some tooling. And that's also important to note. There is changes that are breaking. In the release notes, you can see them if you look at here. For example, breaking change, the configuration property task statistics debuter is now defunct and must be removed, right? For these properties, typically, we deprecate them first and keep them deprecated for quite a while, but eventually we are removing them, and then it's a breaking change. So before then, it's potentially just a changed functionality. We always make sure that that doesn't actually happen. So we go to reasonable defaults or like make the functionality be captured by a different property, whatever. But at some stage, we always try to clean this up, and then it's a breaking change for people that still have these old useless properties in it. So always worth looking at these breaking changes for you. Arguably, now this is one thing where the attention to detail when writing the release notes is important. Arguably, this is also a breaking change. So I might end up sending a pull request to update that, because if you were using Trino and were running it with Java 24, which was necessary before, well, it won't work now because our startup script for Trino actually checks and will stop you from working. Another cool function, another cool feature that I wanted to mention is we have these two new functions, array first and array last, which is cool. We now also have extra headers as an option to support sending random details to the via the JDBC driver and the CLI to Trino, which is very useful because those extra headers can contain information that can, for example, be used by Trino Gateway to route into different Trino clusters. So very useful little feature that's been added here. Next thing is around Google Cloud Storage. The application default authentication is now added. And importantly, also if you look in the release notes, we see that here, Google Cloud Storage. There's a related breaking change that means that where we removed support for unauthenticated access to GCS when the authentication type is set to service account. So you can't use a service account without authentication and access your Google Cloud Storage things. I mean, that's arguably a very bad idea to do anyway. So removing that as a feature is probably mostly a very, very good idea. And one thing that I wanted to also mention is when these changes that come in that are like for object storage and for like also meta stores typically, they affect multiple connectors. So in this case, the Delta Lake connector, the Hive connector, the Hoodie connector, and the Iceberg connector are all affected by this, because the libraries underneath that work and add the information for Google Cloud Storage are all shared across those connectors, and the functionality is shared, so therefore those changes apply. One thing I'm just noticing now, and that's also important to understand, and I might have to send up another pull request to fix that, is that all these changes that are for these 4 connectors actually also affect our 5th connector that we released recently, and that is the Lakehouse connector. So the Lakehouse connector is kind of a combination of some of the features that these object storage connectors all share. And it is also affected because it also uses those shared libraries and functionality. So Lakehouse Connect is definitely something I have to update. By the way, I think I already thought of that to some degree, because in my tracker on current tasks, my contributions tracker, I have one here where I thought of adding it to the plugin docs. So the plugin documentation, if you look here in plugins, I haven't even checked if that's missing, but let me just check now while we're here. You can go installation, installation, and then go plugins. You see here, there's all the like how you install plugins, how you remove plugins. This is important because you can sort of reduce the surface of what your Trino contains. There is a list of connectors, and I'm right. Just like I thought, the Lakehouse connector is missing here. So I should add that too. So stay tuned. I'll send a pull request for that at some stage soon. Over the holidays, maybe I get to find some quiet evening where I can hack a little bit more. So that's the Lakehouse connector and that change, those 2. And this one was a breaking change. Now, the next thing was there is also add support for setting and dropping column defaults via alter table, alter column. So when you change a table, you can change a column now to have default values. Important here to note is this is in the memory connector. So looking back here, you saw that back here in the memory connector. Any features like that to support new language features have to be implemented in each connector. We try to have the memory connector sort of be the most feature-rich one for that sort of SQL support feature. But even when you do that here, the language support for that was actually added a couple of releases before that. So sometimes you might see a section in the general thing about adding support for, like, for example, like this, add support for setting and dropping defaults via alter table statement. If it would be only here, that would be nice as a feature, but it wouldn't be usable anywhere because it's only in the engine. If it's not implemented in a connector to actually then do something about it, this entry alone means like it's that we're ready to do more useful stuff. In this case, we always try to add at least one implementation in the memory connector so it can actually be tested and like validated. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Now, so we sort of like these were what I selected as the highlights. Obviously, everyone looking at the release notes will have different highlights on depending on what they're interested in, what they're using in Trino, their use cases, and so on. So it's always important to look at those release notes. Now, when you look at the release notes like that, we already talked about having these different segments. That's very useful. What's also very useful is when you see things like this, highlighted sections. These are links. So this literally goes to the documentation for what this thing is. So that's very cool to check out. Here, array sort, repeat function. These are not new functions, but there's improved performance. So it's always useful to know these kind of things. That's a great kind of little thing. Now, what you also want to probably know, it's more important to know as a writer of the release notes, but also when you read the release notes, First and foremost, we talk about new features here. Then we talk about anything that breaks or changes. Then we talk about about performance things. So it's kind of sorted. And then we talk about any bug fixes. So if you're only interested in bug fixes, you have to sort of look at the bottom of each of these lists. If you look at, say, for example, the iceberg connector, same thing, right? Like new features, like a performance thingy, really. And then like this is memory pressure, but it's close enough to performance. And then a bunch of bug fixes. And you see there's a lot of bug fixes here. Again, some of these will show up in other connectors because they're related to the underlying libraries. The reason we don't document sort of like the features based on the underlying libraries is because as a reader of the release notes, what underlying library is used means nothing to you. So we don't want to like sort of like confuse you and require people to know how Trino works internally just so that they can even read the release notes. That's kind of crazy. So we try to avoid that. However, of course, the deeper you know what's going on in Trino, the more useful information you can glance out of this. So let me go and show you something else that you can get out of these release notes, and that's that concerning these last bits here. So the last bit here is always a link to, and this is interesting, this here at the bottom here is a GitHub issue. So this is a GitHub issue that was resolved. So someone reported a bug. In this case here, it was Mateusz, who reported a bug. And then in this case, it was a pull request where he fixed the bug. Now, if we look at, let's say, issues, if it's actually like it could also be, no, this is also a pull request. Anyway, so let's go back to this again. So theoretically, these links either link to an issue that was resolved, that's the preference if there was an issue, but a lot of the fixes we just notice and send a pull request, so we don't even file an issue as such, and then it links to the pull request. In all cases, however, what you can find out from this is more information, right? Like, so if you go, let me just look at this, for example. This is Gertjan here. He sent a pull request to add a query text as a regex pattern to match in resource group selectors. You can see here every PR should have a description, some additional context, like here, for example, some of the documentation, and then the suggested release notes. You can also find sort of all the comments and discussions that were used. Importantly, also, you can sort of see who the active maintainers and people are that are helping. And that's sometimes useful because if you don't understand something, what's going on, or you want to chip in more, which is very, very useful, then you can talk to these people also on Trino Slack. Like myself and many others like are either maintainers, like Mateusz here is a maintainer, Piotr is a maintainer, but Christoph, for example, is not, Eric is not, Jack is not either, but they help a lot, right? So that's something that's very useful for people to do. So I invite you all to literally look at these pull requests for features you're interested in and understand a little bit of code base. Over time, you'll learn more and more and more. And then you can chime in and you can also just review the pull request and approve it, right? And over time, you'll get better understanding what's happening and learn that. So it's very useful to look at these individual links for the pull requests of what's done. It also helps to just understand what's even involved. Like, for example, here this PR requiring Java 25 is probably not too complicated, and you can probably understand what's going on in it. And you see here, Jack did that. And if you look at the changes, oh, sorry, that's the release notes PR. That should be. All right, so we found another issue. Because, yeah, so that's wrong, right? So we literally ran into bug of the release notes, which is kind of funny. But so this is wrong. So another thing I'll have to change and send a pull request for. So we can find the right pull request. If you go to GitHub, Trino and go pull requests, go closed, and I maybe go job JDK 25. And there it is, right? So this is the right one. So this is the right PR. So I can go here. And you see what he had to, what Mateusz had to do in order to update the release notes is here. He changed our build. He changed our build matrix for the continuous build integration. As you notice here, we were already building with Java 25 prior to that, just compiling to Java 24. But now we are actually requiring Java 25. Just a bunch of setup here. The system requirements, this is what's being validated when you fire up Trino so that Trino can't start up with the wrong JDK. This .java version is the one that's used in a Docker container to be pulled in. And then you see here also the configuration in the Maven POM. And in fact, you see here the error-prone profile, like we did not need that anymore because it's a default, and we're good now. So that's what that PR did. And that's all about doing the reading more about the release notes. And now I'm going to send a pull request to fix this before I forget. So let's do it. So cd./Trino git. So this is a different pull request that I have here. This pull request, I'm updating some dependencies in our preview UI to React. Peter already tested it, but I didn't get around to it. So it's still a work in progress PR from my perspective. I'm 90% sure or 99% sure it's going to be fine, but I can't just throw it over the wall and hope someone else tests it for me. I'm a maintainer, so need to be responsible and an example for you. All right, that sounds weird when I talk about that myself. But let's go and roll right into it. So I was going to go and git pull upstream master because I haven't gotten everything, so we push that. Oh, sorry. Git checkout master, git pull upstream master, git push, git checkout branch, rn 479, git s, git. Well, so we're already good. So what I need to do is go to my IDE here. Visual Studio Code, just hacking away. For more Java development, I use IntelliJ, but for this text hackery, I just use this. Oh. Sorry, let me open my workspace, Trino hacking. This has Trino itself somewhere. So I can just go 479. Don't need that. See, this is all marked down here, super easy. And we said this is wrong. And let's do this. The right one is this. And let's check if these were changes in the past as well. Like I mentioned earlier, right? This is kind of a breaking change. So let's go do a search. Let's do a search in the release notes. All right, the screen is a bit, let's make it a bit smaller. Sorry. I know it should be readable for you, but it gets so small I have barely any room on the screen here. Find in folder, require JDK. No. Java. What are we looking at? JDK 24. Let's look at that. Java 24. Why can't I find the entries? That's like weird now. Find in folder, Java 24. JDK 24. Use Trino in a... All right, so if you look at here, we had it as a breaking change for 24 in the 476 release note. So I think we should do that again because it is ultimately breaking. If you attempt to do it with 25, it won't work. If you attempt to run Trino 479 with Java 24, it will fail. As you saw also earlier, there was this in the pull request. So let's go git s, git commit, fix JDK 25 release notes entry. Git push. We're on a branch. We can push this. Send the pull request. Just a quick note here. It's a breaking change, just like it was in prior releases, such as 476 with JDK 24. PR link was wrong. Don't need more details. This needs no release notes. Oops. And I'll create the pull request. Check, send that. So I'm gonna request check Martin. Oops, not Copilot, go away. Sorry. Don't need a review from Copilot, that's useless. All right, so we can do that. And while I'm at it, oops, while I'm at it, and before I forget, I can also do the Lakehouse one. So you see here in the releases, we have a, where is it now? The docs with a release template, and that template is used for the next release notes, and it should contain the Lakehouse connector. We'll save that. Go plugins. Iceberg. Let's go Kafka event listener, Loki. All right, so sorry. Lakehouse, Trino, Lakehouse. I guess this is only kind of useful anymore now because the download is now on GitHub, but the link is right there. And there's still some stuff that's available on Maven Central as well. So I guess we can leave that also consistently because for plugins, they still get deployed there usefully. So this should be good. I don't think I have to have it anywhere else. So what we can do is we can build the docs. That's what I thought. So this plugins.md, this Lakehouse download is based off a template. So I have to go and add that to, I forgot where that was. Is some what is happening? There is a function that does that, and I forgot where it is. Conf.py. No. Download py, this is it. So you see, this is this like, oh, it's here next. So this is a little Python function for the Sphinx rendering of the docs, and this configures where things are at. So I have to add the Lakehouse one. So and it's also just a zip. And now it should work without it. So now if I go target HTML index, here's my docs for my local build. And I can go installation, plugins, list of plugins, scroll down to L like Lakehouse, Lakehouse connector. Whoa. And the link is not here, which is weird. This works. I'm just reinforcing a rebuild. Sometimes the rebuild doesn't fully kick in. It's, I think, mostly when the scripts are being used. So this failed. I bet you if I refresh it now, it's going to be good. Ta-da. All right, here we go. This is not testable and all that will not work because you see this is a snapshot version, but I can go and check it out on the live website, github.com/Trino. Releases. And you see here, there is the Trino Lakehouse right here. So I know that it's going to be right. And it's a big honking connector because it has a lot of the stuff in it, just like you see the iceberg one has a lot of stuff. These are connectors that have all the different object storage systems, all the different meta stores. So they have a lot of plugins, like other components that get plugged into it. So they're big. All right, but this is enough. I will send this PR. Let's see, git s, git add dot, git commit, add Lakehouse connector in various places. Git push, send another pull request for that. Oops. And this one I'm gonna ask Martin to review and David, because he wrote that connector. And Copilot snuck in again, so I'm gonna say goodbye again to Copilot. And this also doesn't need release notes. C title. Going forward. in release notes, we should treat it like the other 4 and add relevant entries. Also CC Great pull request. Boom. All right. 2 pull requests done. I think that's it for today. All right. So thanks again for joining me today. Got 2 pull requests out, talked about release notes. You also noticed that Trino releases with full numbers. We'll talk about why we do that and why I think this totally makes sense, not trying to pretend that semantic versioning is a thing that works for complex software, but instead just release new numbers. Controversial topic, I'm sure it's going to be, but whatever. I can just tell you what I think, and then you can take it or leave it. But with that, I'm saying bye, and I'll see you next time. And I'll press this end stream button. And again, I will see you over the holidays.